The House will please come to order. Good morning. Welcome to the 18th day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature's budget session, Wednesday, March 9th. Beautiful, snowy morning in southeast Wyoming. You'll join the Father Thomas Cronkleton from the Cathedral of St. Mary in opening our day in prayer.
This is a poem by Robert Frost, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And let us pray. Lord God, we have many miles to go before we sleep tonight, and snow is in the air with a thick blanket on the ground. You once asked your servant Job, have you entered the warehouses of snow, seen the storerooms of hail which I reserve for times of distress, for a day of war and battle? We hope you don't intend to show us the full contents of those stockpiles, but we are grateful for the much-needed moisture. Be with those who are out in the cold and the snow, those traveling on the roads, those lambing and calving, and those without any warmth or shelter. Be with us also this day as we address all the business before us, especially as we hear, discuss, and amend and vote upon as many bills as possible, most notably those originating from the Senate that need second reading, else they fail. Many are the miles we must yet go today. May they pass quickly, and may we journey them well, so tonight we may have a good sleep. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Roll call.
Convening roll for the 18th day, Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Hare. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Excused. Hallinan. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Worf. Williams. Wilson. Yep. Winter. Ian. Swanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Connolly.
Here.
Littner. Haroldson. Nyman. Ottman. Romero Martinez. Worf. Excused. Wilson. Excused. Mr. Speaker, 56 present, 4 excused.
Thank you very much. We have a privilege of the floor. Representative Kenner,
Mr. Speaker, privilege.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to meet up in the gallery here. Please stand up, gentlemen. We have in the Camel Code for today, matching us for today, is Dan File, who's been coming up from the Colorado legislature for 14 years to help us with our Bible study. And also joining today is Brad Harbaugh, all the way from Raleigh, North Carolina, with the Capital Commission. They are now serving 24 capitals in the United States. And also with them, I think we also recognize this gentleman, Representative Nathan Winters. Let's please welcome them.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for your service. We appreciate you. Representative Roscoe, do you have let's go Representative Roscoe, then Representative Stiver. Representative Roscoe, do you have a privilege? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege. Thank you. I think I'm the only person in here that has not had a privilege this year, and feeling a little left out. I just would like to introduce my family up in the. You have to use your imagination here. So if you close your eyes, you'll see. You'll see two really athletic, strong sons of mine. They just got their haircut, so they're looking pretty good. And their beautiful mother, who did all the work. And then their two little grandsons up there that have kind of a smirk on their face, and they're throwing little paper airplanes down at you. So anyway, but actually they are, one's in Norway and one's surfing down in the Baja, so can't blame them. But you don't have to clap. But one thing that is important to me is the camaraderie we have. And since after the budget session, nobody knows if they're really going to come back or not, right? Because there's an election. And so I would like to offer just a little cocktail hour at my house, which I'll send you the address to. And I'm not inviting the Senate. So, so maybe that will hustle us up and we'll get done a little early. So thank you.
That's probably the best non-introduction I've ever heard. Representative Stiver,
Privilege of the floor.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the back gallery, I want to introduce one of my constituents, Susan Lone, Representative Lone's mom.
Welcome. We're a pretty privileged bunch this morning. Representative Sweeney, you got more luck of the Irish to spread around? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do, as a matter of fact. So folks, I just got these cards that you can frame if you want. I'll leave them on the corner of my desk. I just didn't want to hand them out to everybody and have you throw them away. And so if you want one, I also have some pins of the Irish flag. So, and appreciate everybody that signed on to the resolution. I think Chairman Olson helped with that effort, and I think we got almost everybody. So, thank you.
All right, members. So each year, the legislature sponsors an internship program, which allows students enrolled at an institute of higher education to obtain credit, along with the unique behind-the-scenes opportunity to assist legislators and gain insight into the legislative institution and its vital responsibility in creating public policy. In addition to the college students, this program includes high school students in their junior or senior year and A's, all of whom are sponsored by individual legislators, all of us. Our legislators benefit from having someone who can help them in areas of constituent mail, bill tracking summaries, draft talking points, writing news releases, and other services. LaVonda Copsa has been our intern coordinator for 19 years, and has some interns joining us today. LaVonda, would you make some comments about the program, its value, and in 19 years, you've seen a lot of folks come through, so LaVonda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. I'm here to introduce the interns that were here this session, at least some of them. Obviously, we have had some weather issues that have not worked out for everybody, but we had a total of 11, which I was really excited since we didn't have any interns at all last session. And they came as college interns, as aides, and as high school interns. So I'd like to introduce first Casey Pate at the far, and she's coming from Northwest College, a double major in political science and allied health with a specialty in surgical technology. She'll be attending UW next semester and heading towards a bachelor's degree in political science, minoring in marketing and communications, and her goal is to be a policy analyst or work as a grant writer. And she's looking forward to spending time doing photography in our great state this summer. And next to her, we have Kaylie Smith. She drives in from Wellington, so she had quite the drive this morning. She said most of it was behind a snowplow, so that was a challenge. She's participating through in the internship program through LCCC, and she's a member of our Wyoming Army National Guard, and she's pursuing an associate's degree in communications and creative art, plans to go to UW in the future, and looking for a career in journalism, media, or communications. And then next to her, we have Lexi Darty, who recently graduated from UW with a degree in ag communications. She's assisting with political campaigns this year and exploring job opportunities in the political scene. And once she is able to find gainful employment, she intends to use the proceeds to support her barrel racing habit. And she was sponsored by Representative Somers, who is having her help with his nightly news releases. And last but not least, we have Jenna Broomfield. She's a junior at East High School. And she became interested in the political process 5 years ago when she met Representative Brown. And she said she grilled him on his thoughts on political issues at that point. And I think she was 12. So lots of insight. So he has been her sponsoring legislator this session. And she was also on the champion cross-country team this year. So that's her. And then I just wanted to mention a few others. Maya Marcis is in Laramie and had wanted to be here today. She's working on her master's degree in social work. And she came, sort of unusual, I haven't had this happen before, but she came to the intern program via the governor's office. And she'd been interning with Jen Davis there. She's the senior policy advisor for human services. And so now she's just had a chance to get the legislative view on some of the processes. So we've also had Ashley Riley, who is a high school student from Sheridan, sponsored by Representative Flitner. and Grant Baxter from Sheridan, who was sponsored by Representative Zwanitzer. Grace Steenbergen from Burns, sponsored by Senator Nethercott. Sahaley Allen from Cody, sponsored by Representative Duncan. And Spencer Travis is doing an independent study with Representative Banks and Representative Sherwood. So I think I covered everybody, but most of all, I just want to say thank you to those, whether you sponsored them, whether you had them do a project for you, whether you just smiled at them and greeted them as they went by. Just appreciate so much your support of the internship program, and my strong belief that those students who are coming through this today are tomorrow's political leaders, business leaders, educational leaders, and they are the future of our state. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lavonda.
Should I have them?
We'll do. It's a little overwhelming, isn't it? Thank you. So, Lavonda, first of all, thank you to you for all the work you do. My daughter came through this program, and well, she's working for the executive branch. I don't know how that's working out, but that's a different issue. No, I do thank you for the work you've done, the young people you've helped come through and understand. To these folks and to the ones that aren't here, thank you very much. We hope we can help you in the future. Some of you may be sitting in these seats someday. But in the meantime, let's have two of you go down that aisle, and we'll thank you for your service to our legislature. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Chairman Olson, would you like a privilege?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please proceed.
All right, lots of privileges today. I have the honor of introducing up here in the south part of the gallery, the Leadership Cheyenne class of 2021-2022. I had the privilege this morning of meeting with all of these leaders in my community, and we discussed for 30 minutes affordable housing. And they got a little upset with me in the end because they talked more than me. And but it was a great session where we really just bounced ideas around, not just for Cheyenne and Laramie County, but for the state. So welcome, Cheyenne leadership.
Well, welcome to the House. We're so glad you're here. You get to see us conduct some business. I will need some notes later about how you got more time talking than the good chairman, because we've never had any luck with that. All good, all good. Any other privileges? Any other privileges? Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 8th, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Haroldson and Provenza.
Doesn't appear our doctor of the day is in, so stay healthy until that time. Dr. Hallinan, you're up. You're on cue. You're on deck. You don't want the veterinarian. With that order of business, the signing of enrolled acts. So members, we're going to have a bunch of enrolled acts, so let's keep it to a dull roar. No, let's actually keep it to no roar. If you need to have big conversations, step off the floor. But we got a bunch of enrolled acts, so I'm going to start with that, and we'll keep going. We're at that order of business of a signing of House enrolled acts. First enrolled acts, 34.
House Enrolled Act 34, being original House Bill 117, an act relating to professions and occupations, entering into a compact with other states to allow licensed occupational therapists and licensed occupational therapy assistants licensed in one compact state to exercise a multi-state licensure privilege in other states that are party to the compact, authorizing rulemaking by the compact commission, retaining authority to license occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants only in this state, approving and specifying terms of the compact, making conforming amendments, providing for criminal history background checks, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 34, being original House Bill 117. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 35.
House Enrolled Act 35, being original House Bill 49. An act relating to elections, providing a definition of organization, requiring organizations to file a statement of formation as specified, increasing the threshold for an independent expenditure or electioneering communication requiring an itemized statement, increasing and adding penalties for failure to file as specified, making conforming amendments, adding a penalty of perjury, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 35, being original House Bill 49. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 36.
House Enrolled Act 36, being original House Bill 123. An act relating to environmental quality, requiring the Environmental Quality Council to establish rules for uses and disposal of inert material in non-coal mining sites as specified, providing definitions, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act 36, being original House Bill 123. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 37.
House Enrolled Act 37, being original House Bill 56. An act relating to the Department of Audit examination of books of special districts and certain specified entities, clarifying the audit and reporting requirements for special districts and other specified entities, clarifying the dissolution process for non-compliance, clarifying recreation boards of trustees, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 37, being original House Bill 56. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 38.
House Enrolled Act 38, being original House Bill 55. An act relating to alcoholic beverages, exempting specified airports from liquor license limitations, authorizing a commercial service airport to retain its retail liquor license when contracting specified services, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 38, being original House Bill 55. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 39.
House Enrolled Act 39, being original House Bill 136. An act relating to underground water, clarifying the burden of proof in underground water contested case hearings, specifying applicability, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act 39, being original House Bill 136. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 40.
House Enrolled Act 40, being original House Bill 89. An act relating to mineral production, allowing for regulation of oil and gas production until unpaid taxes are paid, making conforming changes, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 40, being original House Bill 89. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 41.
House Enrolled Act 41, being original House Bill 72. An act relating to game and fish, providing an option for unsuccessful applicants to contribute a portion of refunded application fees as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 41, being original House Bill 72. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 42.
House Enrolled Act 42, being original House Bill 137. An act relating to state lands, requiring the submittal of an application for any proposed land exchange to the Board of Land Commissioners as specified, requiring the board to provide public notice for any proposed land exchange, requiring rulemaking, and providing for an effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 42, being original House Bill 137. I have so signed. So just for the members of Cheyenne Leads and anybody else that might be interested, so what we just did is did the first signature of House bills that we passed. The Senate also went through their process through committee and 3 readings on this end, committee and 3 readings on that end, and we didn't have any differences, or we agreed with their changes, and so we signed them and we sent them to them to be signed. And now we're doing the opposite. Now we're taking Senate files that we've approved, they've signed, then the Speaker, as Speaker of the House, as presiding officer, I will sign them, and then they go to the governor's office. So that's what you're saying. You're seeing the end part of the legislative process in the beginning, and we've got to get these out of the way so they can get off of our desk, and then we'll take up our business here shortly. So thank you for that distraction. Next business is Senate Enrolled Acts, being 21, being original Senate File 9.
Senate Enrolled Act 21, being original Senate File 9. An act relating to revenue bonds, authorizing the Wyoming Business Council to issue revenue bonds as specified for agriculture processing projects, specifying that municipal, county, and joint powers boards industrial development projects and purposes including agriculture and agriculture-related projects, limiting bond eligibility, requiring rulemaking, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 21, being original Senate File 9. I have so signed. Enrolled Act 22.
Senate Enrolled Act 22, being original Senate File 18. An act relating to highways, increasing the threshold to require competitive bidding for county road construction and maintenance, amending the nominating associations for the members of the Wyoming County Road Standards Committee, limiting spending on motor graders from a county road construction and maintenance fund, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 22, being original Senate File 18. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 23.
Senate Enrolled Act 23, being original Senate File 49. An act relating to boards and commissions, repealing the Palliative Care Advisory Council, the Governor's Food Safety Council, the Division Advisory Committees on Underground Water, the Health Benefits Plan Committee, the State Employees Compensation Commission, and the Wyoming Public Television Council, providing conforming amendments, providing for rulemaking, providing for the reversion of funds, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 23, being original Senate File 49. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 24.
Senate Enrolled Act 24, being original Senate File 48. An act relating to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Funding Act, providing for funding of large projects under that act, specifying large projects approved for funding in 2022, specifying conditions for large project funding, authorizing distributions from the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust income account for approved large projects, providing for the reversion of funds, repealing statutes previously authorizing large projects that are completed, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 24, being original Senate File 48. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 25.
Senate Enrolled Act 25, being original Senate File 26. An act relating to the judiciary, providing for an additional district court judge in the 3rd Judicial District, providing for an additional district court judge in the 7th Judicial District, authorizing an additional district judge position in the 6th Judicial District, specifying conditions for the authorization to be effective, providing for appropriations, authorizing additional positions, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 25, being original Senate File 26. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 26.
Senate Enrolled Act 26, being original Senate File 19. An act relating to taxation and revenue, creating a county optional property tax refund program, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 26, being original Senate File 19. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 27.
Senate Enrolled Act 27, being original Senate File 10. An act relating to agriculture, specifying that the Department of Agriculture shall coordinate efforts and make contracts for predator control, allowing the Animal Damage Management Board to contract directly for predator services, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 27, being original Senate File 10. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 28.
Senate Enrolled Act 28, being original Senate File 32. An act relating to reading assessment and intervention, requiring approval of assessment and screening instruments, requiring parental or guardian notification, requiring professional development, requiring rulemaking, requiring studies, requiring reporting, providing for an appropriation, establishing payments for professional development expenses as specified, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 28, being original Senate File 32. I have so signed. So members, just did the tally. If you were keeping track, 70 enrolled acts total we've signed on this end of the body. Some of them still need to be signed on the Senate side, but 70 enrolled acts, 28 senates and 28 senates and 42 House enrolled acts. Oh, and I apologize. Congratulations for personal bills, Representative Kinners, Walters, Eklund, Greer, Summers, and Western. And Barlow snuck one in there too, or whatever. What do you want to do? Messages from the Senate.
Message 258. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below failed to pass the Senate third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments. Ayes 14, noes 16. Message 263. Mr. Speaker, the Senate adopted the Committee of the Whole report, failing the bill listed below by the vote indicated. House Joint Resolution 5, Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Investments and Distributions. Ayes 13, noes 16, excused 1. Message 264. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below upon reconsideration failed to pass the Senate third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments. Ayes 15, noes 14, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Okay, we're at that order of business. The bill is on second reading. First bill for our consideration is Senate File 55.
Senate File 55, sponsored by Blockchain, Insurance Sandbox, an act relating to insurance.
All right, members, I have two amendments. I'm just making sure that I'm missing one, so. There are three amendments, members, and we have second reading number one, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 55 and do ask for your favorable consideration. This is a little easy amendment. It changes the fee for anyone who wants to play in the sandbox. We're going to make them pay $10,000 to play in the sandbox instead of $5,000. And the purpose of this amendment is it deals directly with what the good committee number 2 did with the bill, with the appropriation to make it basically we're trying to make this self-funded, so we need to ratchet this fee up. That's all that is, or licensing application fee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment 1, second reading amendment number 1. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 55. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Next amendment, 2. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 55. Would ask for your favorable consideration. And members, this is an amendment that was discussed, I think, in both bodies, and we discussed it in our committee. It wasn't moved. And so it's really brought by some of the industry partners, industry insurers, who have concerns about too large of a sandbox to play in. And so there are 5, if you look on page, the middle of the bill, we're going through all of the insurance code and taking all sections into account of what type of entities can play in the sandbox and how big the sandbox is to play in. And so what the amendment does is take 5 of those areas out or off limits to be applied for and to be worked on within the sandbox. And I'll just tell you what they are. The 5 areas that this amendment would take out of being allowed in the sandbox are the statute on authorization of insurers, fees and taxes, assets and liabilities, investments, and administration of assets and deposits. And so, as you can imagine, a bill like this coming forward that allows other people, entities, perhaps unknown right now, coming into our state and saying, hey, what innovative things can we try? And kind of, as you remember, these sandboxes allow you to get around or with various qualifications, kind of bend the rules of our current regulations and laws for innovative ideas. And so in these 5 areas, they're asking for there not to be anybody coming to bend the rules in areas of fees and taxes or investments or assets and liabilities. This gives some of our industry partners a little more agreement to the bill. And so then we just renumber, because we're taking out 5 of those sections. That's why the amendment is so darn long, because you have to renumber every other Romanet all the way down. Be happy to answer any questions.
Members, first time, Representative Stiff on the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, just a question for the bringer of the amendment. It looks as though what this would do is essentially delete all of the real meaningful portions of the bill, so that if we pass it as amended, then there will really be no change to any insurance regulation. And if that's the policy choice we make, that's the policy choice we make. I just want to ask if that's what this means. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go with Representative Andrew, and then we'll go to Chairman Olson. Representative Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would resist this amendment. We are competing with other states who have sandboxes, and Utah has a universal sandbox that basically anything could fit in, and they do not put any restrictions on anything in the insurance code. That doesn't necessarily mean that something might, be considered or anything is up for consideration to be in the sandbox. We could still say no under this legislation. But if our insurance sandbox is more specific than other states that they might have the option to do business in, it would be less attractive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to urge you to resist this amendment. And there's actually another second reading amendment that you'll see. So trying to set up a real policy choice for you. And I honestly believe that the next amendment actually addresses the real concern from legacy insurance. So this, just to remind you, this bill has been through 3 committees, and it was an interim bill. And so during the interim, we heard from obviously people who are interested in availing themselves of this new and unique idea to be innovative and bring diversification to our state. We also heard from our friends who are here and wonder why we would want different rules for different people. So we've heard all of this before, and as the amendments, I don't think get to the root of the problem, because as I discuss with our legacy folks, I think the concern, and if I'm hearing it right, and you probably are hearing the same thing, is this fear that someone will come with an application and exempt themselves entirely out of the code. That's the fear. The fear isn't that, I hope the fear is not that somebody gets an exemption under one of these statutes and builds a business and is successful and brings jobs to Wyoming. I hope that's not the fear. I think the fear is that they would be exempted out of the code. And I have had the position that I really trust our good commissioner to never approve an application that would say, please exempt me from 1/3 of the statute book. So a subsequent amendment is going to make that very clear in the bill that that's prohibited. If we start going into the sandbox like what this amendment does and carving out different exceptions, we don't know why we're doing that, because we don't have an application in front of us that says we want to be exempted from these. I don't know if these are important provisions. I have no idea. But in terms of a business, whether the business is going to choose these. So when we crafted the sandbox, we tried to make a big sandbox, as you can imagine, because we want to invite everyone to come and play in the sandbox if they want to play in the sandbox. And what will happen over time as these applications come in, one, if it's a bad provision that is bad for Wyoming, commissioner's not going to approve it. So if any of these sections that are being deleted out of possible exemptions, I think you should put a little more trust in your commissioner. But two, if that keeps occurring, I think that's when the prudent time is to come back for this body and say, you know what, we've had 10 really bad applications that want to exempt out of these 4 or 5 categories, and they're all bad actors. So let's stop inviting them in. Let's delete it then. But right now, we don't even know if that's the case. So, body, I would just urge you to resist the amendment. I am very cognizant of all interests in this bill, and that's why I'm bringing the next amendment to try and bridge that gap so that everyone can be happy with this sandbox and allow more people to play in it.
Happy in a sandbox. There's a term for the day. Chairman Wilson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on and for the amendment. And I think it's very easy to say, you know, there's too much regulation and we should just exempt folks who want to be exempted from all sorts of things. And I have lots of faith in the commissioner who does a really great job, but I have the luxury of being able to have my green book here in front of me. I won't read from it because that's still not allowed, even if I am on Zoom. But some examples are in this section that the amendment wishes to remove from what they could exempt from. For example, no foreign insurer owned or controlled in any manner or degree by any government or governmental agency shall be authorized to transact insurance in Wyoming. Conflict of names prohibited. No insurer shall be formed or authorized to transact insurance if that insurer has or uses a name which is the same as or deceptively similar to that of another insurer already authorized. I'm not going to read all sorts of these, but to my mind, these two sections that the amendment is attempting to pull out are really basic transparency and corporate type requirements, making sure that the people have the actual funds, that they have to put in annual statements, that there's an audit requirement. I really cannot see why we would want to waive requirements for that sort of thing. And so why should we leave it up to the poor commissioner and his overworked staff? And I just want to say, this is not based on any wording from the commissioner. This is just my perception from having heard testimony from them on many other things regularly in the Labor Committee. I think that this amendment is a good amendment, and I think there is such a thing as going too far and taking the sides off the sandbox, and I won't go on with the metaphor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, ladies and gentlemen, this amendment essentially guts the bill because these are the primary functions that are performed, and so essentially it's kind of like an anti-compete clause. If you take this out, then the sandbox won't be big enough to have any real purpose.
Any other member, first time? First time on the amendment. First time. First time on the amendment. Second time. Second time. Second time. Representative Stith.
So, members, to make
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, members, sort of to give a concrete example, with the bill as drafted, we could have a new kind of life insurance. It could be a life insurance lottery, which would be a lot of fun. So let's imagine that the members of the body down the hall, instead of living in their different districts, let's imagine they all lived in a nursing home together, okay? And let's imagine that they all wanted to put in $1,000 into a pot, and the rule was that whoever is the last survivor gets all the money. That's an old-fashioned 18th century French tontine or life insurance lottery, which you can't do right now under existing insurance law, because under existing insurance code you have to have $2 million in the bank, and they're not going to have $2 million. But with this insurance sandbox, you could have a life insurance lottery, and how fun would that be?
I can't wait for the headlines tomorrow. I don't know how that actually plays. Any other member? Second time. Second time. Second time. Into the sandbox. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So insurance agents and people who deal with insurance, they don't want to have a lot of fun, right? Think about the people who you work with and you don't want your insurance agents to be the kind of personality type that want to go have a lot of fun, right? The people who do insurance, it's all about risk, and it's weighing that risk against the population, right? No matter if it's property casualty, if it's health insurance. And so I can appreciate that this bill went through an interim committee. It certainly wasn't either of the two committees that deal with insurance, either on the property casualty side, which is my committee that I oversee, or the Labor Health Committee that oversees the other side of insurance. I think you've heard from those two committee chairmen. You know, we think this is a good amendment because we deal in this area a lot and deal with people who deal with insurance, and they're not quite ready to have a bill. I mean, you just read the catch title that limits waivers of specified statutes and rules. Insurance is about risk, and there's a whole lot of agents out there that I've talked to, you know, my personal ones, as well as the industry, that are saying, we don't want to open the sandbox, right? And so this is one amendment that I think would, you know, help me appreciate the bill and continue to move it forward. I know you all heard I was a no vote in committee. It's just pretty quick, pretty fast. And I do appreciate, I think 3 other states have this, and I think the state to our southwest was mentioned. They've had 2 applicants, neither of which were successful in this area. And I don't believe that I've heard we have any applicants banging down our door to try this. And so I can appreciate that we're trying to compete in this area. I just don't think there's a demand right there, at least yet. And by taking this step when people aren't comfortable, you know, insurance is regulated by the state. It's one of the few things we have left, that each state controls their own insurance. Opening it up to all sorts of interesting things, sure, it could be fun, but you're going to have a lot of skittish people, and I think they would appreciate your consideration of putting this amendment on in those areas when it comes to, you know, regulation of agents, when it comes to fees, when it comes to liabilities. Those are really important concepts in the insurance world, and we're just, in my mind, and I think your local insurance agent's mind, is not ready to open up the sandbox to let anybody come and play when it comes to risks at that level. So I would appreciate your consideration of the amendment.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 2, Senate File 55. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted. Next amendment, number 3. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move amendment number 3 to Senate File 55 and do ask for your favorable consideration. This is the amendment I mentioned And it goes into the portion of the application of the bill on page 10 and very clearly states, no application under this section shall request to waive every statute specified and in the previous section. So those pages in the bill that list out the insurance code and say these are the areas that you may exempt out of, we're not going to let anyone put in an application that says, by the way, we just don't like the insurance code at all. Now, again, I feel really confident that an application of that sort would be denied. It's certainly not the purpose of the sandbox is to get around the entire code. Nobody wants that. In fact, I don't think most entities want that. Most entities want to avail themselves of regulation. It's just trying to find where really some of these smaller companies might not have the ability to go through all the same tape as some of these really, really big companies. So that's all this does, just trying to make that really clear. I know this is a concern that I heard during the interim as it moved through the 3 different committees. I heard this concern. I heard this concern in the testified to in the corporations committee. So I'm just trying to address those concerns and improve this bill.
Majority Floor Leader Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I thought I'd get in the sandbox here for just a minute. To the good bringer of this amendment, first of all, I'm not sure I'm for the bill. But if you wanted to throttle this bill, right, throttle it down a bit, start easy, right? Start easy would be not, in this amendment would be you can't do every, but you can do all but one statute or all but one little piece of one section. So my question to you is, why wouldn't you pick maybe the one piece of statute that you want to play in the sandbox on, and just let's narrow it to that and try that out, see how that works, and then expand it if it in fact has an effect or it works. And so I really don't understand why we're doing the bill and what we are to gain in Wyoming by doing this bill. And if we are, then why wouldn't we try to just narrow that sandbox a bit, and just look at little chunks instead of big chunks?
Chairman Zwanitzer, first time on the amendment.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Just a question. So there are 43 sections in the insurance code, and the way I read the amendment, you can work around 42 of them as long as you don't work around that 43rd. I just want to clarify that.
Any other members, first time? First time on the amendment? First time on the amendment? First time, second time to the sponsor, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Trying to stay on the amendment, but I do want to answer the good majority floor leader's question, and I can certainly talk more off mic about it. But we actually, so in a sense, this body actually already did that. You already passed out a bill, insurance investments. It's already passed the Senate. It's going, hopefully going into law. That bill is a product of the exact scenario the good majority floor leader laid out. And why you need this sandbox, actually. What the sandbox can do is invite people in, and that's what happened. When we started the topic discussion over the interim with the sandbox, a company came in, and so we continued to build the sandbox, but what we figured out while we were building the sandbox was exactly that, what the majority of the floor leader pointed out. Wait, there were some carve-outs for companies like that really we don't need a whole sandbox to do. And so we built that legislation as well, and we passed that legislation. And I use that as an example because the sandbox is a marketing tool for the state of Wyoming, and that's what it's going to be. Companies that are interested and realize that we are open to do business and we are inviting different ideas and diversification of our economy, we want that. We're inviting it in. And if you can find a way to do that and play within the rules, we want you here. That's part of the consumer protection. And if that means that nobody uses the sandbox and we develop other legislation that does address those, whatever provision in the code that is prohibiting that we're not concerned with, then I think we can still continue to do that. But that doesn't mean you don't need the sandbox. In the end, if that's the scenario, all you did was build a sandbox and no one shows up to play in it, and the state of Wyoming didn't cost the state of Wyoming a penny. But we still brought companies into Wyoming. So back on the amendment, again, just trying to close some of the concerns and tighten up the bill.
Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 3, Senate File 55. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. All those in favor, please stand. Just as enthusiastically as you said aye. All those opposed? Less than 30, as we have a couple of folks absent. So the amendment is adopted with modest enthusiasm. Senate File 55 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, so ordered. Next, Senate File 61.
Senate File 61, sponsored by Senator Perkins. Sage grouse, game bird farms, no certification expiration 2. An act relating to game and fish.
Shockingly, there are no amendments. Senate File 61 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next, Senate File 78.
Senate File 78, sponsored by Senator Ellis. Language proficiency, seal of biliteracy, an act relating to education.
Senate File 78 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Next, Senate File 82.
Senate File 82, sponsored by Water. Supplemental Water Development Funding, an act relating to water development.
We have an amendment. Chairman Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 82. Members, this is a clarifying language which our LSO attorneys have requested to be added pertaining to the Fontenelle Reservoir. I recommend approval of the amendment. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1, House Senate File 82. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 82 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, so ordered. Next, Senate File 85.
Senate File 85, sponsored by Senator Perkins. Child Care Facilities Certification Exemption, an act relating to children.
Senate File 85 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 86.
Senate File 86, sponsored by Senator Boner. Wildfires, one call exemption, an act relating to public utilities.
Senate File 86 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next, Senate File 92.
Senate File 92, sponsored by Senator Landon. Driver's license renewal or extension exception, an act relating to motor vehicles.
Senate File 92 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 100.
Senate File 100, sponsored by Senator Landon. Stalking amendments, an act relating to crimes and offenses.
Senate File 100 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 106.
Senate File 106, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss. Wyoming Stable Token Act, an act relating to trade and commerce.
We have amendments. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 106 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, I'm fine. I think this is an interesting idea and should be able to garner us some additional funds without a whole lot of work on the investment shop. But my amendment is on page 4. The bill has 2 places where it suggests that, so it talks about when the person redeems the token, they get $1. So one would assume that that means that you exchange dollars in the first place for the token, but it doesn't specifically say that. And so my amendment is just on page 4, after the end of paragraph B, it would insert a stable token shall only be issued in exchange for a United States dollar. And my purpose in putting that in is just, we have heard that the treasurer's office has plenty of work, lots of accounting to do. And I just want to make sure that we don't distract the office by turning them also into an international foreign exchange service by taking in euros or, you know, some other kind of cryptocurrency or whatever, and having to exchange that, for which there's always a fee, and then purchase the treasury bills or notes. So that this is just, to my mind, tightening that up, what I think we're assuming, but making sure. I'll be
Chairman
glad to
Wilson.
take any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. Will you just move that amendment just in case I missed that?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker. I believe I did, but I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 106 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Any member first time on the amendment? First time? Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I checked with the Senate prime sponsor on this to make sure that he didn't think that it had any negative effects. I think it's a great amendment. Vote aye.
And generally, we don't worry about what someone at the other end of the hallway thinks. So let's keep that in mind. We'll take our actions. Any other member first time? First time. First time, second time. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 106. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. We're back on the dollar. Next amendment is 2, Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, I move amendment number 2 to Senate File 106 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is a clerical correction. In committee, I believe we actually already did delete the word indemnification, but in the transcription and getting the bill ready for the system, it didn't come through. So this amendment conforms the bill draft to as it was approved by the committee. And so why are we deleting indemnification? And the reason is because we put an amendment that gives super strong absolute immunity to the state, all state officials and all state employees. And so if you give super strong immunity from liability, then there shouldn't ever be a time when the state employee needs to be indemnified. You know, indemnified is when you are liable and then you want someone else to pay for your liability. So this is just a clerical correction, and I would encourage an aye vote.
Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion. Seeing none. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 2, Senate File 106. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Number 3, Chairman Harshman.
Chairman, I've got a corrected copy coming on this that's not right, and I don't know if it's going to make it in time, so I think I'm just going to withdraw that and bring it third reading. So,
All right, we have a withdrawal of second amendment number 3. Thank you. We can expect a third reading. That's your request is going to be a third reading amendment? All right, so we will not expect a number 5. Next amendment for our consideration is number 4, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move second reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 106 and ask for your favorable consideration. So I really do like the idea of this bill and what we could do in the state of Wyoming, but one concern I had that wasn't answered is what if we want to roll this up and decide we don't want to do it anymore? So, you know, as a nation, when we issue currency, we back it forever. And I didn't see anywhere in this, if we decide 50 years from now we want to end it and make a call on our tokens and pay it off and be done with the program, that we could do it. So this amendment would allow the state of Wyoming to have an endpoint, if it so chose, to issuing stable coin and recalling that stable coin. And so you'll read the amendment, and I'll just read it for you. If the Oversight Committee determines it's necessary and in the best interest of the state, at 2 meetings not less than 30 days apart, it may then, after a third public meeting held not less than 45 days after notice of its intended action, publish at least online and in not fewer than 4 newspapers of general circulations in regions of the state, direct the treasurer to cease issuing Wyoming stable tokens and all Wyoming stable token operations and pay out all outstanding Wyoming stable tokens, If directed to cease operations under this subsection, the treasurer shall not more than 90 days after being directed stop issuing any Wyoming stable tokens and announce that the state shall not issue any new stable tokens after a date certain. The treasurer shall offer to redeem, and I'm not going to read it all, but you get you get the general idea. You got to have a lot of public notice. In the end, you go down here. I will read one of these next ones. The treasurer shall offer to redeem any outstanding Wyoming stable token for a period of 5 years, and shall publish weekly notice of the date certain after which a Wyoming stable token shall not be redeemable in 4 papers in regions of the state. And then no Wyoming stable token shall be able to be redeemed after a date certain specified in the notice. So you have to have lots of notice if you're going to take away that right from somebody. It was really not a right at this point. But the idea is, can we retract out of this? And whether this is the most elegant way of doing that, I can't answer that. But I think we have to have the ability to end the program if we so choose as a state.
Thank you. Any member first time on the amendment, number 4. First time on the amendment. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly appreciate the sentiment here, but at the same time, my concern with this amendment is that it could undermine or jeopardize the value of some of these tokens when they're issued, in the sense that this could impact the volatility, the price volatility. Part of the importance of this, or one of the benefits, is that these are going to be a pretty good store of value. And if knowing that these can, potentially have the rug yanked out, I understand that there are checkpoints and a process laid out in the amendment, but I'm worried that if a token holder knows that the rug could get pulled out, proverbially speaking, that this could undermine the value and the price at which they are traded and exchanged at. So that's my concern. I urge you to resist the amendment.
Members first time, we're still on first time on the amendment. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to urge a no on this amendment, not because I disagree with the premise, but because I'm afraid that the number of days laid out and the way they're laid out here would not functionally allow this to take place. If you have 2 meetings 30 days apart, you're at 60 days, yet you have to take action within 40 days, 45 days of when it's first noticed. And so I think there just needs to be a little more refinement on this particular concept to make sure that the days laid out actually line up with one another, because then at the end you have to do it within 90 days, and after 60 days plus 45, you're past your 90-day maximums. And so as I said, I just think there needs to be a little bit more layout in this before we proceed, if this is the direction we want to go. So at this time, I would encourage a no vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson online, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Interesting comments from the previous 2 people gave me a lot more to think about on this amendment. What my question had been was more in the lines of a third reading addition to this, but my question would be worked in, I guess, with whatever the decision of the body on this is. I'm wondering whether there was any thought given to expanding the notification from Wyoming regional newspapers, which when we heard the presentation in committee of the whole, I got the impression that these might be fairly large institutional buyers or international or national type buyers. I would think we might want to, if it did come to this, and we might want to refine that decision, maybe notice in a national level financial newspaper would be more likely to be read by the holders. Any thoughts onto that? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Don't you think? Don't you think? Representative Baker, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. I think this just makes it a little bit too, I guess, descriptive. I think that through rules and regs, we can handle a lot of this. And I don't know if the members are aware, but the president just signed an executive order in this area today. So I think the United States is starting to shift and the United States really wants to move and start leading the way in this industry. And I think Wyoming has an opportunity to lead the way. So I would say let's resist this amendment and move this issue forward, and we can deal with a lot of this stuff in the rules and regs in the Treasurer's office. Thank you.
Any other member, first time, first time, first time, first time, second time? Second time, Representative Stith, you moving to the mic, moving away from the mic, just moving in general? Representative Stith, second time.
Mr. Chairman, urge a no vote on this. There's an interesting separation of powers issue here because we have an oversight committee that's composed of members of the legislature as well as of the executive branch, directing the state official who governs our treasury to do something, and it seems to like creates an odd issue there. So please vote no.
So members, I apologize, that was first time. That was still first time. I jumped ahead. I was thinking about the previous amendment. So first time. Any other member, first time, first time, first time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and in favor of the amendment. The timelines work. It's 30 days, 30 days, 45 days. 90 days is on the backside. Ultimately, I guess it's a decision. Do you want this for all time without ever having to review it and be able to get rid of it without coming back in a later session and have statute on it? I don't think we want to do that. I think Wyoming wants to be able to end any program it starts. So I just want you to think about that on and for the amendment.
Thank you. So members, we are voting on second reading. Amendment number 4, Senate File 106. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment is not adopted. Senate File 106 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. All right, members, Chief Clerk Harding has emailed out a joint conference committee report. We're not going to take it up right now, but I just wanted to be aware. We're going to start getting some of these joint conference committees, and she's going to email them as soon as she gets them in the morning, priority to you. So you can just open your email and you'll have the joint conference committee reports. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think we're going to proceed with third reading. You have a new list? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move the third reading consent list consisting of the following bills: Senate File 3, 8, 11, 41, 43, 53, 73, and 77.
It's kind of choking him up there, all that consent. Reading clerk, does anybody want any of these bills removed from consent? Any bill removed from consent? Removed from consent. Reading clerk, please read the bills on consent.
Senate File 3, sponsored by Transportation, Radioactive Materials Transport Fee, an act relating to commercial vehicle fees being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 8, sponsored by Agriculture, Weed and Pest Reorganization, an act relating to weed and pest control being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 11, sponsored by Senator Anderson, display of state flag, an act relating to the state flag being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 41, sponsored by Senator Cost, expanding Next Generation 911, an act relating to the administration of government being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 43, sponsored by Senator Wasserberger, community college district elections, an act relating to community college district elections being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 53, sponsored by Senator Nethercott, local government liability pool amendments, an act relating to local government insurance program being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 73, sponsored by Management Audit, codifying the Institutional Land Fund, an act relating to public funds being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 77, sponsored by Senator Ellis, name change, duration of residency requirement, an act relating to petitions for name changes being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass through the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent list. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly.
Aye.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer excused. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson.
Aye.
Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. McGuire. We have 58 aye, 2 are excused. As for Senate File 3, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Wharf, aye to no. Larson Dan, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Fortner, were you a no? Fortner, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Rodriguez Williams, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 48 aye, 10 no, 2 excused. As for Senate File 8, are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 1 no, 2 excused. As for Senate File 11, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 58 aye, 2 excused. As for Senate File 41, are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Larson Dan, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Wharf, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 48 aye, 10 no, 2 excused. As for Senate File 43, are there any changes? Stivar, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 56 aye, 2 no, 2 excused. As for Senate File 53, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Fortner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 1 no, 2 excused. As for Senate File 73, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 58 aye, 2 excused.
And as for Senate File 77, are there any changes? Fortner, aye to no. Further changes? Wilson? Wilson, aye to no. Further, Jennings, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 55 aye, 3 no, 2 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate Files 3, 8, 11, 41, 43, 53, 73, and 77 have passed the House. With that order of business of bills on third reading regular lists, first one, Senate File 80.
80 or 81?
We have 4 bills on the list, members, 80, 81, 101, and 102. There was a change late in the order, so the reading clerk wasn't caught up. So Senate File 80.
Senate File 80, sponsored by Water. Omnibus Water Bill Construction, an act relating to water development projects, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Number 1, Chairman Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to SF 80. Folks, this amendment pertains to the contingency fund for our dams and reservoir projects. We have 16 projects in the design, bidding, and construction phases. It's a daily balancing act trying to respond to the inflation that's going on now on our projects. We're concerned that our contingency fund is too low, and so we're asking you to allow us to slide $5 million from the water account number 3 that's already set aside for this purpose. We're asking you to slide it across into this appropriation so we can keep these projects flowing. I ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Discussion. Seeing none, members, we're voting on third reading. Amendment number 1, Senate File 80. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 80 have been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly,
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer excused, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker, Nicholas. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Further changes? Stivar, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 52 aye, 6 no, 2 excused.
By your having received Senate File 81, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 81 has passed the House. Actually, I'm sorry, that was Senate File 80 has passed the House. Senate File 80 has passed the House. Next bill, Senate File 81.
Senate File 81, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Clarification of existing state ownership of groundwater, an act relating to water, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading amendment number 1 and will withdraw it at the appropriate time. So members, before we vote on this, I just wanted us to all take a deep breath and ask ourselves if we need this bill, ask ourselves what problem this bill solves. The operative language of the bill is very simple. It says, pursuant to Article 8, Section 1 of the Wyoming Constitution, the underground waters of the state of Wyoming are property of the state. Very simple statement, right, that the underground water is owned by the government. So what could possibly go wrong with that? And it turns out a lot could go wrong with that. The question is, so either our Wyoming Constitution already provides that the underground water is owned by the state, or it does not. And the short answer is nobody knows, because we don't have a decision from our highest court about what that provision of the Constitution actually means. So what problem does this bill solve? The state does not need to own the underground water in order to regulate it, just as the state does not need to own the underground oil in order to require permits for drilling. So there's not really a need for the state to own it, right? So you're not really solving that problem. Let's imagine we adopt this, we pass it out, and it turns out that our highest court thinks that the Constitution does not provide for state ownership of underground water. Well, what does that mean? That would mean that this bill would have the effect of being a taking under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution of a lot of privately owned property underground, right? So the question is, well, how much is that worth? Well, a lot, I guess, right? It would be all the underground water owned by private property owners. And so then those private property owners would be entitled to just compensation, and then the state gets stuck with a bill for issuing checks to all of those people for the water that the state just took. So that seems a fairly significant downside risk, and we're doing it all to not really solve any particular problem that I can think of. And the other problem is just more philosophical, is that here we're having a statute saying we're going out of our way to say the government is going to own and just take over a resource and just be the owner of it. Well, many decades ago, I took a full semester course in communism. And at that time, the only people who believed in communism were professors at American universities, right? And if we pass this bill, we can add to that list the state legislature of the state of Wyoming, right? So I know this would be a revolution, and I know we all want to change the world. But when you talk about expropriation, you can count me out. So please vote no. So I will withdraw the amendment at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Majority Floor Leader Summers on the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So I guess the state wouldn't own the wildlife either, huh? Maybe in that scenario, I guess. So I guess my question to the good constitutional lawyer, and I am not a lawyer and I don't really know the answer to this question, but if a Supreme Court determines this law to be unconstitutional, doesn't it strike the law? It doesn't make you enforce a law that's unconstitutional. So I'm not sure that we would be liable to pay out a whole bunch of stuff. So I am kind of curious on that. I guess it is a policy call. I mean, in Wyoming, we've been going under the assumption that we own the groundwater. except for seepage. There's a couple of court cases that say in the case of seepage, so seepage, let's say, and I can give you an example. So I put water on a high meadow, and then underneath that in a bench, it leaks out. So that seepage is then probably owned by me. That's even debatable under surface water regulations. But certainly the state owns surface water, and if the state didn't own surface water, we would be in as big a pickle perhaps as some of the lower basin states on the Colorado River. And we have much better water law than exists to the south. And so, it's your call. I'm going to vote for the bill, but I don't think we're going to end up paying out a lot, but maybe the good lawyer could tell me on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. First time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was really undecided on this bill, but I appreciate the good Rock Springs lawyer bringing this forward, because the more and more I've started to think about this, we're talking about whether or not this is constitutional. And in my mind, there's one way to make sure that this is constitutional. We should have put a constitutional amendment forward and asked the voters to ratify it. To me, what we're doing is we're going into the green books and saying, we own this now. We think we own this, and until it's litigated and until somebody has enough money to take it, hire an attorney, go to the Supreme Court, fight it at the Supreme Court, and have that case law adjudicated, that's what we're saying with this particular bill. There's a far higher threshold when we start talking about constitutionality. We've passed 2 of them out of this body, and 2 of them will be on the ballot. It's a 2/3 vote. It's not just a simple majority. I think there's a reason why this particular bill was brought the way that it was brought, to get a simple majority to push through water law. I don't like that. I think if we want to have a constitutional argument about whether or not we own the groundwater, then let's have a constitutional argument and let's change the Constitution. That's the proper way to do this particular bill. I also would like to know, and I did not hear this during committee of the whole or during second reading, what problem are we trying to solve with this? I guess I have not seen in the papers anywhere across this state that I have seen that this is a major issue that needed to be solved in a budget session, and we needed to address this immediately because of some pretty serious cases going around. If that were the case, I think we'd probably be having some water lawyers rambling outside here trying to get us to fight for this. But I'm wondering if maybe we're taking a step too fast. Again, I'm gonna side with the good lawyer over there that this is a step too far. And if we want to have a constitutional debate, let's have a constitutional debate. So on and against the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Chairman Wilson online, and then we'll come to Representative Heiner. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually for the amendment and against the bill, and it's taken me a little while to land in this position. I've been sort of landing and taking off again like a bird on a telephone wire, because I'm not a lawyer or an ag producer or a water person either. And initially I liked it because I thought in my mind it seemed obvious that the underground water would fall into all the other constitutional categories of water. But the thing that has settled me against the bill in the end, and as a former healthcare administrator, I hate to say this because we never really like to see lawyers show up. But what I notice when I look at the pathway of this bill, excuse me, is that of all the sponsors and co-sponsors, I think there's only one attorney whose practice is not in this area. And the bill, rather than going through judiciary, where you might think you'd get a bunch of legal folks contemplating the Constitution, has gone through ag on both sides. And obviously the ag interests have great interest and insight into water. I don't mean to dismiss that at all, but we all look at things from our own perspective. And so I would be, just for the concerns that have brought up about unintended consequences of passing a law regarding something constitutional without going into the Constitution and what happens, which again is beyond my purview, I've decided that I'm not ready to vote for the bill this session. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Heiner, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill it says clarification of existing state ownership of groundwater. This is a clarification of the Constitution. We passed a number of bills as recently as just a few minutes ago that were clarification for existing statutes. So there's nothing wrong with taking a proactive approach before litigation to try to clarify some of these things so that we don't have extended litigation afterwards. So if the state does not own the groundwater, what problems would that cause? Well, I'm not an attorney. I've only got about 8 years of college to get there, so I'm not there yet. But it says here that a riparian water right provides, if the state doesn't own it, then the riparian water rights doctrine comes into play. And that doctrine provides that an owner of the land, the surface land, has absolute ownership and domain over underlying waters he can capture and has the right to the reasonable use of such water. So do we want to go there? Do we want to go to the riparian water rights, or do we want the state to own the water? Now, a question I have for the bringer of the amendment, the federal organization that is charged with our environmental protection has allowed the state of Wyoming jurisdiction over water. So if there is a groundwater contamination at this point in time, our organization that administers the environmental quality has the right to force that water to be cleaned up underground. But if we don't own that water, will we lose jurisdiction and not be able to force groundwater contamination to be cleaned? So that's a question in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Simpson, on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel responsible to share some insight into this bill with you folks. When the word ownership, when it pertains to water, is a little bit unclear. What does that mean? Does that mean that the state can just take away everybody's rights? And that's not correct. Ownership means that we have the ability to control and permit. When you build a new home out in the country and you drill a well, you have to apply to the state engineer's office to get permission to drill the well and to demonstrate that you've beneficially used the water. So that's the permitting process. What we're experiencing here is that oil and gas producers are drilling wells without the state engineer's permission because they don't need it, because they're not after water, they're after oil and gas. But what's happening is they have a byproduct and they're producing acre feet after acre feet of water that's coming to the surface. We now have outside entities that are interested in cleaning that water up and actually selling it and dispersing it, which is okay. It's beneficial there and we have it on the surface. But the challenge is that that water has never been quantified and identified as a state-owned asset, which means it's not permitted. And so the objective of this is to look at waters that were brought in from groundwater, brought to the surface, that no one claims ownership for, and yet we as a state can't quantify it and permit it properly. So that's what this does. It quantifies the groundwater that's being brought up under a different permit, and it allows us to be able to manage that in the future.
Other members, first time Representative Vice Chair Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment and for the bill. So let's think about what we knew in 1890 and what we know now. So 1890, you could hand dig a well. You're much further than 100 feet and you're pretty much, you got a big job in front of you. Did we know that certain aquifers were hydrologically connected to surface water in 1890? I would guess we probably didn't have a real big grasp on that like we do now. Did we know we had huge aquifers under this state that also go under other states? Right outside of town here, giant aquifers that go under other states that if we don't have these problems today, we will in the future in claiming those waters. I just want you to think real hard and support this bill, because there are some major ramifications when we think about the other side of the state that drains down to the western United States. That's some of the highest value water there is, I would say, in the United States, one of the highest value commodities in Wyoming. If we get this wrong and we don't claim these waters and somebody finds a loophole, I would say that's the risk. So on and for the bill, against the amendment.
Any other members, first time? Chairman Nicholas, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going down a rabbit hole here. And it's one that I don't know who knows the answer to what we're talking about. And we're on several different planes. But let's just talk about the Constitution. We've got the Constitution that says that the state owns the water. There's 130 years of jurisprudence on what that means. And we know what it means. So the question is, does this statute, as it's brought, as just talked about by the previous speaker, somehow alter that definition and how we treat it? I would respectfully suggest that it does not, that it actually does nothing. But the problem is, we just had a water law expert tell us that this may alter how we treat wastewater off of, say, an oil well. I don't see that in this bill, but what this could do is it's a Pandora's box for litigation to say, oh, do we mean something different than the jurisprudence that we've had for the last 130 years? And if it does, what does it mean? How does it change it? How does it change our ability to capture an oil well and to take the discharge and run off and then somehow grab it, clean it, and resell it, and who's in control of that water? But folks, we have laws that deal with that now. This doesn't address that issue, I would submit. All this does is it's a verbatim quote of the Constitution in a statute. And it's not going to, I don't believe it's going to change anything other than confuse, because perhaps the intention is we're doing something that's already in jurisprudence and in the Constitution, but it doesn't spell out what it does. It's just a statement or an overture over an existing statute. So I'm on it against the bill and for the amendment.
Any other member, first time? First time. First time. Representative Nyman, first time, then Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To me, I'm on and for this because I think what I'm seeing and what I look at as I read this is simply nothing more than clarifying in statute what we're already doing. And it's establishing it in the statute. We're not asking for a constitutional change, just simply as a legislative move here to say what we're already doing so that there's more clarity in the statute. It's not going to stop anybody from having to apply for a permit. It's simply saying that while our Constitution, depending on how you look at it, depending on how you see it, our Constitution remains silent, really, on our groundwater. And all this is doing is it's not trying to go and open a can of worms. It's simply putting in statute what we're already doing, a legislative response saying, here's the way we do business, this is the way we do it, we declare that we do own these waters, and here's where it says we've been doing, and we're just basically clearing that up. Because on a larger scale, and I keep going back to this, and you guys are probably going to get really weary of me saying this for however long my legislative tenure is, Wyoming has successfully allowed other states around us to take the dominant share of our water and the priority on our water. It leaves this state going every direction. We are a headwaters state. Every side of our state has got states that join us that have prior appropriation on our waters. And I don't think it is in our worst interest to establish in our statutes that we are going to declare statutorily that Wyoming owns its groundwater. We are currently having to pay for permits for it. I push back a little bit on the communist deal there. I'm not exactly high on that idea, but I think we need to, as a state, protect our waters. And we need to establish the fact that they are ours, and that we'll manage them, and we'll manage them well, and we'll make sure and provide for protection for prior appropriation and adjudication and beneficial use. And I think putting this in black and white will help bring clarity to that. So on and for the bill.
Thank you. Representative Gray, first time on the amendment.
First for a second, thank you.
Any other member, first time? First time. Chairman Eklund.
Yeah, so I could clear up a little bit.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Um, I'd like to clear up a couple things people asked about what brought this on. Are there cases pressing and whatnot? There actually has been one south of us, a state south of us, that had similar water law. Their constitution only dealt with surface water, and then later, like we have, assumed that the underground water was also controlled by our state and permitted by our state. They went into, their water law wasn't, I'll say this about it, their water law wasn't as strong as ours. It was just said water. Ours has streams and rivers and pools and still waters. And still waters is a big deal, because that could, it sure sounds like the ocean that exists underneath me where I live. But they had to go through a court case, and they had to do quite a stretch to bring groundwater into their existing water law. I do think that our case law would support that it is clearly the same thing. All of these waters, we have the hydrology that shows us all the waters are tied together. Probably every sewer treatment plant will eventually end up in a system that's all tied together. And we have that working for us. This is a codification or a clarification of what we have in case law. And maybe it's not necessary, but I really don't want to get into a lawsuit like that state south of us did, and then have to depend on how many times have we heard, boy, I'm glad that court or that judge or so-and-so made this ruling. We should never be to a point where we have to hope for the best court to make a decision concerning something this important. So that's why the clarification has been brought in my mind, and I think it's worth going ahead and moving it forward and continuing this conversation. It won't be over with this third reading.
Any other member first time? First time, member first time, second time, second time, second time, second time to the sponsor, Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Would like to address the thoughtful question from the representative from District 20. What would happen if we pass this bill and then our highest court says that the Constitution does not give the state ownership of underground water? Would that invalidate this statute? And the answer is no. It wouldn't make this statute invalid, because the state has the power of eminent domain. The state can take your property if it so chooses. It just has to provide you just compensation. So if our highest court were to say underground water is not included, that's when this bill would have real bite. But it would have bite in a real serious way for the state, because then you'd have claims against the state. And a final note, as others have said, it's just, I don't think we get any mileage out of trying to clarify what the Constitution means in a statute. You just basically can't do that, right? Either the Constitution means what it does. So I respectfully withdraw the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Stith. Senate file 81, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly,
No.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer excused, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
No.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Clausen? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 26 aye, 32 no, 2 excused.
Having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 81 has failed to pass the House. Next Senate Files 101.
Senate File 101, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss. Fedrine and Naxaline Administration Authority, an act relating to public health and safety being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Representative LeBeau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 101 and would ask for your favorable consideration. This is just a technical amendment. It's a conforming amendment, and it's just making clear the Pharmacy Practice Act, that the board and the practitioners have authority to do what the bill intends, so I would urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussions on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Representative Wharf on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would stand in support of this amendment. This is a great catch. We just met this morning and talked about potential items for interim. And this was something that was kind of suggested was the language that we had inserted in this was rather specific. And this does open it up so that when we do have new medicines, new drugs that become more available, we are having a fentanyl problem in this state, the strength of which is unbelievable. We're needing drugs, and we are developing them. I think this is a great amendment. I would urge the body's adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time? Any other member first time? Second time? Second time. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 1, Senate File 101. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 101 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, no. Having read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly,
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer excused, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Burt? Nyman? Any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 56 aye, 2 no, 2 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 101 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements. Committee announcements. Vice Chair McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Conference Committee for Senate File number 40 will meet today in West 110 on the main floor at 1 o'clock for some vigorous debate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs will meet tomorrow on noon recess to discuss interim topics with our fellow committee down the hall.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Appropriation Committee will meet at noon tomorrow in room 301 to hear joint interim topics. Your Cap Fin will meet at 9 a.m. in the JAC room, also to meet interim topics.
Thank you very much. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Revenue Committee will meet jointly tomorrow in Capital Extension Meeting Room number 5 at 1 p.m. to discuss interim topics. Tomorrow, Thursday, March 10th. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, your Joint Ag Committee will meet to discuss interim topics, and I'm not sure of the room number, so I'll figure that out. You will too. You probably know. Can't be far off.
Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to request a quick point of privilege.
Please proceed.
So an email went out this morning from the governor's office. For those that haven't seen it, I would like to invite all the co-sponsors on House Bill 81 to join me in the historical signing of the legislation. So thank you. Oh, that will be at 2 o'clock. So thank you.
Signing at 2 o'clock. So we're going to start having some folks off the floor for signings. I would remind you that we are going to take up our last third reading today is Senate File 102. Senate File 102. What we might do, I'll check with the Chief Executive's office. What we may do is do some concurrences and some other things so we can delay Senate File 102 so we have the members that want to vote on that on the floor. So we'll just make sure, we'll try to coordinate it with the Chief Executive's office, and I'll look into that with our staff. Further announcements. So members, your Joint Conference Committee number 1 on House Bill 100, legislative redistricting, met this morning. There are some maps being put together based on some requests from several different parts of the state. Those should be hopefully being posted on the website as soon as possible under the redistricting map portal. And it affects some of your districts, so please take a look at those as the day progresses. And then we will be hopefully meeting, if that work is done, we'll be meeting 3 or 4 this afternoon. We'll announce that when we kind of see where our day ends up. So, seeing no further business, this House is in recess until 2 p.m.